Usually, when we think about a golden cage,
Yeah.
right, the immediate instinct is to look at the bars.
Right.
Like, we focus on the constraints of wealth, the pressures of high society, that suffocating weight of expectation.
Oh, absolutely. The obligations.
Exactly. But what happens when the door to that cage is just, wide open? Why is it that sometimes the people with the absolute most privilege, the most comfort, the softest beds, why are they the ones who are most desperate to escape it?
Yeah.
And not just to leave, but to actively choose to live in literal squalor. Just to feel, I don't know, something they call free.
It's a fascinating paradox, isn't it? Because it's not about escaping suffering.
Right.
It's about actively seeking it out, because the comfort itself has become a form of sensory deprivation.
Well, that's a good way to put it.
Right. We operate under this baseline assumption that human nature always moves toward security, toward ease.
Yeah, survival instinct.
Exactly. But there is this profound, almost destructive countercurrent in human psychology, where absolute security feels indistinguishable from a kind of living death.
Wow.
When every single need is met before it even registers as a desire, you lose the friction that makes you feel alive.
That friction, yes, or like the desperate need for it. And that is exactly where we are dropping anchor today in this deep dive.
We really are.
We're stepping into the world of Miguel de Cervantes, specifically one of his novellas exemplaires, exemplary novels, called Illustrious, which translates to The Illustrious Kitchen Maid.
Which is quite the title.
It is. And right off the bat, if you hear 17th century Spanish romantic comedy, you might be tempted to, tune out.
Yeah, you expect some dusty, irrelevant costume drama.
Exactly. But what Cervantes is doing here is laying out a psychological blueprint for the very things we still argue about today.
Oh, absolutely.
The performance of identity, the illusion of radical freedom, and the honestly grotesque ways society decides whose existence is valuable and whose is disposable.
It's incredibly modern when you actually look at the themes.
So let's start with the boy who breaks out of the cage.
Okay, so we find ourselves in Burgos, which is a city in northern Spain that at the time was just synonymous with immense wealth and very rigid nobility.
Right. Old money.
Very old money. And we are introduced to two young men from these incredibly wealthy elite families, Diego de Carrizales and Tomás de Avendaño.
But Cervantes really points the camera at Carriazo first, right?
He does. And Carriazo's trajectory completely baffles everyone around him, because at just 13 years old...
13?
I know, 13. This kid decides he has absolutely had enough of the aristocratic life.
And what's wild to me is that he isn't driven away by tragedy.
No, not at all.
Like, he's not fleeing an abusive father, he's not running from a scandal, and he certainly isn't running from poverty.
He has everything.
He has everything. He leaves his lavish home purely out of this, craving for the picaresque lifestyle.
Yes, the picaresque.
He wants to be a rogue, a vagabond. He starts sleeping in haystacks. And there's this incredible detail in the source where he reportedly sleeps in the hay as if it were fine Holland linen.
He totally romanticizes it.
He claims to feel no cold, no heat. He travels through Madrid, down to Toledo, learning how to gamble, how to hustle, just surviving on the streets.
And eventually he lands in Zahara de los Atunes in southern Spain.
Which is the tuna fisheries.
The tuna fisheries of Zahara. And we have to pause here and understand what this place actually was.
Yeah, set the scene for us.
Because in the 17th century, this wasn't just some quaint fishing village. It was the finibus terrae.
The ends of the earth.
Exactly, the absolute ends of the earth of the Spanish picaresque world. It was the ultimate gathering place for the dregs of society.
We're talking thieves, runaway kids, con artists,
pirates, murderers, and just the lowest, most brutalized laborers. It was defined by extreme physical agony, horrific smells.
I can't even imagine the smell of a 17th century tuna fishery.
Oh, it would be unbearable. And constant violence. But also a total exhilarating breakdown of societal rules. Wow. And Carriazo, this sheltered rich kid from Burgos, he absolutely thrives there. He spends 3 whole summers wading through fish guts and criminals, and he loves every single second of it.
Okay, hold on. We need to unpack the psychology of this. Because honestly, it's infuriating.
It really is.
He essentially gets a master's degree in being a rogue. He gets so good at hustling that he wins a massive amount of money playing cards, buys himself a beautifully tailored, aristocratic outfit, and he just walks back home to Burgos.
Nothing happened.
Like it was a gap year.
Yeah.
His parents weep with joy. They throw a feast. They welcome him back.
The prodigal son returns.
Exactly. But after a few months of luxury, he gets bored again.
Of course he does.
The call of the tuna fisheries is too strong, and he decides he has to go back to the dirt. But before we get to what happens next, I have a massive problem with Carriazo's whole vibe here.
Let's hear it.
Is this actually a quest for freedom, or is this just poverty tourism?
That is the exact philosophical friction Cervantes is introducing.
Because it feels so fake.
It does. Let's look at it through the lens of asceticism. Historically, true asceticism, whether we are talking about the Stoics or, the Cynics like Diogenes.
The guy living in the ceramic jar on the streets of Athens.
That's the one. True asceticism requires a fundamental, permanent rejection of societal structures. The goal is to strip away all worldly attachments to find a truer, uncorrupted version of the self.
Right.
Now, Carriazo is certainly stripping away his socially constructed identity. He's shedding the title, the wealth, the velvet clothes, trying to find a more authentic mode of existence in the brutal reality of the fisheries.
But it's not authentic. That's my whole point.
Tell me why.
Is it actually asceticism if you have a massive golden safety net waiting to catch you the second you get tired?
That's the million-dollar question.
Carriazo knows in the back of his mind that if he breaks a leg, or if the violence gets too real, he can just say his last name and be rescued.
He's never truly in danger of falling off the edge.
Exactly. He literally takes a vacation from the top of the social pyramid, plays in the mud, and then goes home to a hot bath.
Yeah.
It feels less like Diogenes and more like, I don't know, a modern trust fund kid moving to a gritty neighborhood to quote-unquote find themselves.
Wearing perfectly distressed thrift store clothes.
Yes. While their parents are quietly paying their premium health insurance and their rent.
You're touching on existentialism centuries before Jean-Paul Sartre even gave it a name.
Oh, really? How so?
Your critique of Carriazo is entirely valid in an existential framework. Sartre argued that our existence precedes our essence.
Meaning what, exactly?
Meaning we are born first, just blank slates, and then we have to define who we are through our free choices rather than relying on some predetermined script.
Okay, I follow.
Carriazo is experiencing profound existential angst. The predetermined path of a Spanish noble, inherit the estate, marry another noble, manage the wealth, maintain the status quo, it feels to him like a suffocating script he had no hand in writing.
Right, the golden cage we talked about.
Yeah. Exactly. So by choosing the squalor of Zahara, he is attempting to assert radical free will. He wants to prove he is an autonomous being capable of surviving on his own merits, not just as the son of Don Diego.
But his radical free will is a complete illusion.
Because it's subsidized?
Because it is entirely subsidized by his privilege.
Yeah.
He never actually escapes his essence, because his essence, his safety net, his education, his underlying confidence that the world won't actually destroy him is the only reason he can take these risks in the first place.
That is spot on.
The real laborers in Zahar de los Atunes don't have a mansion in Burgos waiting for them when they get tired of the smell of rotting fish.
No, they don't.
They're there because the alternative is starvation. Carriazo is playing a survival game, but he's the only one playing with the cheat codes activated.
Precisely. And the fascinating thing is that Cervantes is highly aware of this inauthenticity.
He is. He doesn't just think Carriazo is cool.
Oh, definitely not. Even when Carriazo is living among thieves, he is described as having a certain undeniable nobility about him.
Oh.
He's generous with his winnings, he doesn't drink to excess, he maintains a certain cleanliness. He's what the text frames as a virtuous rogue.
Which is an oxymoron.
It is. Now, we have to ask why Cervantes does this. On one hand, it implies a very rigid 17th century belief in biological or class determinism.
The idea that good blood will out.
Exactly. The idea that even in the literal gutter, high-born blood naturally shines through. But on the other hand, it highlights the exact hypocrisy you're pointing out. Carriazo isn't a real picaresque anti-hero. He's putting on the costume of the marginalized to cure his own boredom.
And he's about to drag someone else into this performative rebellion, isn't he?
He sure is.
Because when he gets bored back in Burgos, he goes to his best friend, Avendaño, who is also wealthy, also noble, and completely embedded in the elite lifestyle. And basically says, you have to come with me. The tuna fisheries were incredible. You're going to love it.
Like he's pitching a resort vacation.
Exactly. And Avendaño, surprisingly, agrees to blow up his entire life.
The mechanism of their escape reveals just how insulated they are by their privilege. They concoct this elaborate, deeply cynical lie.
It's so mean.
It really is. They go to their fathers and declare that they have a sudden burning desire to study Greek and Latin at the University of Salamanca.
Which was what, the Ivy League of Spain at the time?
Absolutely. The intellectual center of Spain. The fathers are, of course, overjoyed. They furnish the boys with a massive sum of money, 400 gold escudos, which was an absolute fortune.
Life-changing money.
Oh, definitely. And they assign a trusted tutor, a man named Pedro Alonso, to escort them and manage their education.
And what do these two enlightened young nobles do? They completely betray him.
Without a second thought.
They get as far as Valladolid, sneak into the tutor's saddlebags, steal the 400 escudos, and hand him a sealed letter.
The letter is incredible.
They tell him to go to a famous fountain outside the city. And when he opens the letter, it's basically a massive middle finger. It says, "Hey, Pedro, we've decided that weapons are better than letters. We're going to Flanders to be soldiers instead of going to Salamanca. Please go back to Burgos and tell our dads, oh, and we took all the money. Good luck."
It's a ruthless, remarkably callous severing of ties. It demonstrates a complete lack of empathy for the tutor.
Because he's the one who's going to have to face the wrath of two powerful noblemen.
Exactly. His life is probably ruined. But the boys don't care. They sell their expensive mules, buy cheap, coarse peasant clothes, visually transforming themselves from aristocrats to common laborers, and they begin walking south towards Andalusia, fully intending to hit the tuna fisheries.
But they never make it.
No, they don't.
The narrative takes a completely unexpected left turn because of a conversation they happen to overhear in a town called Illescas, just outside of Toledo.
Right. They were just hanging around an inn, listening to a couple of muleteers guys who literally drive pack mules for a living, shooting the breeze.
And one of the muleteers starts raving, just absolutely losing his mind, over this girl who works at the Posada del Sevillano, which is a famous inn in Toledo.
He refers to her as the illustrious Frigona, the illustrious kitchen maid.
And the way he describes her, I mean, it completely derails the entire plot and Avendaño's entire brain.
The description is striking because of how elevated and poetic it is, especially coming from the mouth of a mule driver.
Yeah, you wouldn't expect it.
He says she is as hard as marble, yet her face is like a festival day.
Wow.
He claims she has the sun on one cheek and the moon on the other, that she is made of roses and carnations. He insists with absolute fervor that she is far too beautiful for a common inn, that she is a jewel fit for a count or a duke.
And Avendaño, upon hearing this description, and we really have to emphasize this for you listening, he has never laid eyes on this woman.
Boomer.
He has only heard a muleteer's exaggerated review, and he is instantly, obsessively, irrevocably in love. He turns to Carriazo and says, "We are not going to the tuna fisheries. We are going to Toledo."
It's immediate.
We have to stop and dissect this, because this is borderline psychotic behavior by modern standards.
It certainly seems that way.
Avendaño abandons his entire rebellion, his grand plan to assert his independence, because of a Yelp review he overheard at a rest stop.
A very poetic Yelp review, but yes.
He falls madly in love with an acoustic representation of a visual ideal.
That's a great way to put it.
It is the 17th century equivalent of falling deeply, obsessively in love with a perfectly curated Instagram profile, or like an AI chatbot before you've even verified the person exists.
Right.
He isn't falling for a human being with flaws and a personality. He is falling for the idea of perfection. What is happening in his brain?
To understand the mechanics of Avendaño's obsession, we have to dive deep into Renaissance Neoplatonism.
Okay, break that down for us.
This was the dominant intellectual and philosophical current flowing through the educated classes of Cervantes' time. And it goes all the way back to Plato's theory of the forms.
Right, like the allegory of the cave.
Exactly. Plato argued that the messy physical reality we perceive with our senses is just a flawed shadow of a higher perfect reality, the realm of pure ideals.
So we're just looking at shadows on the wall.
Yes. But Renaissance thinkers adapted this into Neoplatonism, specifically regarding the philosophy of beauty.
How so?
They believed that physical beauty in the material world was not just an aesthetic accident. It wasn't just genetics.
Okay.
It was a direct reflection, a literal emanation of divine spiritual goodness and truth. Therefore, perfect outer beauty guaranteed perfect inner virtue.
So, because Avendaño has this elite, university-prepped education, his brain is practically hardwired by this philosophy.
Exactly. It's his default operating system.
When the mule driver says she has the sun and moon on her cheeks, Avendaño's Neoplatonic programming automatically translates that physical description into a moral absolute.
Yes.
He thinks if she is physically perfect, she must be spiritually, morally, and inherently perfect.
Precisely. And Cervantes is structuring this entire encounter around a very specific, sophisticated cognitive puzzle known at the time as an emblem.
An emblem, like a logo.
In the 16th and 17th centuries, an emblem wasn't just a logo. It was a tripartite art form. It consisted of a title or motto, the inscriptio, a visual image, the pictura, and an explanatory text or poem, the subscriptio.
Right.
It was designed as an enigma, a philosophical riddle that the viewer had to decode to reveal a deeper moral truth.
Okay, so how is a teenage girl working at an inn functioning as a walking Neoplatonic emblem?
Well, the title of the emblem is her moniker, the illustrious kitchen maid.
Right.
Philosophically, this is an impossible paradox. The word illustrious implies high nobility, distinguished lineage, pure blood.
And a frigona.
Frigona is a girl who scrubs pots and floors, the absolute lowest rung of domestic working-class labor. In the rigid class structure of 17th century Spain, the two concepts violently contradict each other. They cannot logically coexist in the same body.
Okay, I see where this is going.
The visual image, the pictura, is Constanza herself, or rather the overwhelming, blinding physical beauty that everyone reacts to.
Right.
And the explanatory text, the subscriptio, is provided by the muleteer's glowing description and Avendaño's immediate Neoplatonic interpretation of it.
Ah.
So the philosophical riddle Cervantes is forcing the reader and Avendaño to solve is, how can a scrub maid be illustrious?
And Avendaño's immediate psychological response to the riddle is basically, if she is this beautiful, the paradox must be resolved in her favor.
Exactly.
Her physical beauty is objective proof to him of a hidden underlying nobility. It is fascinating because it completely warps the subjective reality of everyone in her orbit.
She is treated like a saint.
Yeah. She is treated as an object of intense reverence, guarded like a relic, before anyone even has a clue about her true biological bloodline.
Which is incredibly strange for a maid.
But let's be honest, this also exposes a really dangerous, toxic philosophy of aesthetics. The idea that physical beauty equals innate moral goodness is just the halo effect, but weaponized as a divine mandate.
Oh, completely.
And we still do this today. We assume attractive people are smarter, kinder, and more capable, and we forgive them for atrocious behavior while assigning moral failing to people who don't fit our aesthetic ideals.
You've hit on the exact danger of Neoplatonism. And Cervantes is playing a very complex, almost cynical game with it here.
How so?
Because, spoiler alert, as we will eventually learn, Constanza actually is biologically noble.
Right.
So on a surface level, Cervantes seems to be validating the Neoplatonic ideal. He's saying, look, her outer beauty really did reflect her hidden inner nobility.
So he agrees with it.
No, because he simultaneously satirizes the absolute absurdity of Avendaño's behavior. Avendaño is so desperate for a transcendent ideal to worship, so eager to find meaning outside his predetermined noble life, that he constructs a metaphysical idol out of a kitchen maid based on a few poetic lines from a sweaty mule driver.
It highlights this massive gaping void between the signifier and the signified.
Yes.
The social label, the word frigona, signifies a low-class, disposable laborer. But Constanza's physical reality signifies high-born nobility. Avendaño is caught in the cognitive dissonance between the societal label and his philosophical ideals, and he chooses to believe the ideal.
He chooses the fantasy.
Meanwhile, Carriazo must be absolutely losing his mind.
Oh, he is.
He just wants to go gamble and fight in the fisheries, and now his friend is dragging him to a hotel in Toledo to stalk a girl he's never even met.
Carriazo is furious. But he values the loyalty of their friendship too much to abandon Avendaño. So the two runaway aristocrats walk into the Posada del Sevillano in Toledo, dressed head to toe as peasant boys.
And this is where their grand performance of identity reaches a fever pitch, moving from theory into daily grueling practice.
Yes, because to stay close to Constanza, they have to deeply embed themselves in the micro-society of the inn. They literally have to get jobs and participate in the labor economy.
And they fully commit to the bit. Avendaño, the lovesick aristocrat, takes the fake, incredibly generic name Tomas Pedro and becomes the boy who dispenses barley and straw for the mules.
It's very manual labor.
And Carriazo takes the name Lope Asturiano and becomes a water carrier, whose entire existence revolves around leading a donkey back and forth from the river to fill the inn's massive water tanks.
They are no longer nobles. They are essential cogs in the inn's machinery.
And this embedding brings us to a stark, deliberate contrast Cervantes sets up between Constanza and the other women working at the inn, right?
It does. If we are exploring the philosophy of labels and identity, we must look at the real Frigonas working alongside her, specifically two women named Arguello and the Gallega.
And the juxtaposition is almost cruel in its execution.
It really is, because while Constanza is technically called a Frigona, Cervantes makes it very clear she doesn't actually do any of the brutal, dirty work associated with the title.
She has scrubbed floors.
No. She is the keeper of the inn's silver. She spends her days tucked away, praying, working on delicate embroidery. She is fiercely isolated and physically protected by the innkeeper and his wife.
She is treated as pure, silent, and fundamentally unattainable. She is literally on a pedestal.
Exactly. While Arguello and the Gallega represent the visceral, unfiltered reality of working-class survival, they are the complete opposite of the Neoplatonic ideal.
They are loud, deeply lustful, entirely integrated into the messy, sweaty reality of the inn.
And they immediately set their sights on seducing our two disguised nobles.
Which is terrifying for the boys.
It is. Cervantes paints an incredibly grotesque, hyper-detailed portrait of Arguello in particular. She is described as being around 45 years old, and Carriazo is viscerally terrified of her advances.
The details are us.
He notes that her breath reeks of cheap wine, she has fake teeth, she wears a wig, and crucially, she paints her face with an incredibly thick layer of lead-white makeup. The Spanish term used is mascarón de yeso puro, which translates to a mask of pure plaster.
A mask of pure plaster. That visual is horrifying, but it also feels like the thematic key to this entire section.
How so?
Because we are diving head first into the realm of performative identity. When I hear mask, I immediately think of the sociologist Irving Goffman.
Oh, and his theory on the presentation of self in everyday life.
Exactly. He argued that all social interaction is basically a theatrical performance. We have our front stage persona that we perform for society and our backstage reality. Everyone in this inn is aggressively managing their front stage performance. Everyone is wearing a mask.
Let's analyze the mechanics of those masks, because the layers of deception here are brilliant. Arguello wears a literal physical mask of plaster and lead makeup to perform a youth and sexual desirability she no longer biologically possesses.
Right, she's desperately trying to maintain her viability in the social economy of the inn.
Yes. Avendaño and Carriazo are wearing the metaphorical masks of coarse clothing and fake names, performing as lower-class laborers to hide their immense wealth and nobility.
And Constanza.
Constanza is the tragic inversion of them all.
Wait, how is she inverted?
She is wearing the social mask of a Fragona, a degrading title forcibly applied to her by society, which completely obscures her true, innate nobility.
Oh, wow.
The boys choose their masks for an adventure. Arguello uses hers for survival. But Constanza's mask is a prison she didn't build. It is a philosophical house of mirrors regarding innate worth versus social presentation.
And this forces us to ask a really uncomfortable question about class appropriation.
Let's hear it.
By having these rich kids put on the literal clothes of the working class, by having Avendaño shovel barley and Carriazo haul water until his hands blister, what is the psychological outcome?
Do they learn anything?
Right. Do they actually gain genuine empathy for the systemic suffering of the working class? Or are they just appropriating the gritty aesthetic of poverty for their own romantic or rebellious ends? Are they just tourists on Goffman's front stage?
The text heavily implies it is appropriation, and Cervantes highlights the inherent theatricality of their lower-class performance through a very specific literary and cultural device.
The dance scene.
Yes. There is a vividly described scene where Carriazo, fully embodying his role as Lope the Tough water carrier, leads a massive wild dance outside the inn called a chacona.
And he's just shredding on the guitar.
He plays the guitar, he dances frantically, and he improvises these incredibly clever body lyrics, openly mocking the other frigonas and the mule drivers. Literary analysts point out that this scene functions mechanically exactly like an entremet.
For those who might not know, an entremet was a short, comical, usually very raunchy and satirical theatrical sketch, right?
Yes.
That was performed between the acts of a serious, full-length play in 17th century Spanish theater to keep the audience entertained.
Precisely. By embedding the structure of an entremet directly into the narrative and having Carriazo literally act as the director and star of it, Cervantes is flashing a massive neon sign to the reader.
This is a play.
Exactly. These boys are actors. Their poverty is a performance art piece. They haven't actually crossed any class lines. They have simply constructed a stage out of poverty to entertain themselves. And the philosophical weight of this realization falls squarely on Constanza, because she isn't playing a game.
Right. She is trapped in the role of the servant while being innately noble, while the boys are freely choosing to play peasants to escape the burden of their nobility.
It's completely
It
asymmetric.
really forces you to examine the concept of meritocracy and innate worth. Because here's the thing, Avendaño is actually really good at his fake job.
He is. He's very competent.
He shovels barley well, and the innkeeper loves him because he manages the accounts perfectly. But does his ability to balance the inn's books make him an exceptional, hardworking peasant? Or does it merely prove that his elite, expensive university education gave him an insurmountable advantage over the actual illiterate laborers?
It proves that class markers are highly porous, easily manipulated by those with resources, and often entirely arbitrary.
Definitely.
And Cervantes pushes this exploration of identity and ego even further with Carriazo. Because while Avendaño is inside the inn, paralyzed by his Neoplatonic obsession, agonizing over Constanza and writing secret poetry.
Being miserable.
Right. Carriazo is out in the dusty streets of Toledo, fully immersing himself in the violent, competitive role of the water carrier. And this leads to one of the most famous and philosophically devastating sequences in the entire novel.
The incident with the donkey.
Yes.
Okay, here's where it gets really interesting. This is where the story shifts from a romantic comedy into a brutal psychological study of the ego.
It takes a dark turn.
Carriazo, playing his role as Lopi, needs a donkey to haul water. He goes to the local market and buys a sturdy beast for 16 ducats. Proud of his purchase, he wanders over to where a group of genuine hardened water carriers are sitting on the ground using their cloaks as a makeshift table.
And they're playing a highly illegal high-stakes card game called La Primera.
Now remember Carriazo's history. He considers himself a master gambler, right?
A true rogue who conquered the deadly tuna fisheries.
He believes he's infinitely smarter and more capable than these street laborers. So his ego compels him to sit down and play.
Big mistake.
Huge mistake. Because the social dynamics here are different. He is playing against men whose survival depends on this hustle. So he starts losing.
Quickly.
He loses all his cash. Then, desperate to assert his dominance and stay in the game, he bets the donkey.
But he doesn't bet the whole animal.
No, he bets it quarter by anatomical quarter. And he loses every single quarter to the very man who just sold him the donkey in the first place.
It's humiliating. The guy who sold it to him stands up to take the donkey back.
But Carriazo, driven by absolute sheer audacity and a refusal to accept defeat, stops him. He says, wait a minute, I bet the 4 quarters of the donkey. I never bet the tail.
It is the most absurd, desperate, legalistic loophole imaginable.
It's hilarious. The other water carriers just laugh in his face. They explain the basic logic of livestock trading. They say, look, when you sell a sheep, the tail naturally goes with the hindquarters.
Basic common sense.
But Carriazo refuses to yield. He argues, using this bizarre pseudo-logic, that Barbary sheep actually have 5 quarters, the 5th being the tail.
He's just making things up.
And he demands that if the winner wants to take the donkey, he must physically cut the tail off the living animal, perfectly cleanly from the exact root of the spine, and hand it to him. If he leaves even a fraction of an inch of the tail on the donkey, the bet is void.
And to back this up, he pulls out a weapon.
Carriazo pulls out a dagger, ready to fight a dozen hardened laborers to the death over a donkey's tail.
And here is the shocking part. His sheer psychotic commitment to the bit, his threat of extreme violence over something so utterly ridiculous, it actually works.
They back down.
The other water carriers are intimidated by his manic energy. They agree to let him wager the tail against one of the quarters. Carriazo, riding this wave of adrenaline, ends up winning his donkey back, quarter by quarter.
Unbelievable.
And then, in a move meant to reassert his underlying noble superiority, he gives all the money he won back to the losers. He views himself as generous, brave, and triumphant. He has dominated the picaresque world once again.
But that triumph lasts for about 5 minutes.
Not even.
Because the story of this insane card game, and specifically the ridiculous argument over the donkey's tail, spreads through the streets of Toledo like a virus.
It goes 17th century viral.
It really does. The street kids, the boys of the town, hear about it, and the next time Carriazo goes out to haul water feeling like a tough guy, a mob of kids starts following him. They point at him and relentlessly yell, "Daca la cola, Asturiano! Give us the tail, Asturian, give us the tail!"
This is where we must apply a rigorous philosophical lens, because Cervantes embeds a deeply cynical truth about human identity in this moment. The text explicitly refers to the mob as the bad beast of the vulgar crowd.
The bad beast.
Notice what the crowd does not remember. They completely forget Carriazo's generosity in returning the money. They forget his physical bravery with the dagger. They forget his actual skill at cards.
They don't care about any of that.
The collective memory of the public is incredibly lazy. It remembers only the most reducible, humiliating punchline: the joke about the tail.
The mechanics of this are so intensely relevant today. It is the exact same algorithmic psychology as going viral for a stupid mistake on the internet.
Oh, 100%.
You could be a brilliant scientist. You could have spent 10 years building homes for the homeless. You could be a deeply complex, loving parent. But if someone films you tripping and falling face first into a wedding cake,
you're done.
The modern digital mob operates exactly like the 17th century street mob. They don't want your complexity. Complexity requires empathy and cognitive effort. They just want a caricature.
Yes.
They reduce your entire multifaceted humanity down to cake guy. You are stripped of all nuance, and the moment you try to assert your complex humanity, you ruin the joke, which just makes the mob angrier.
You are describing the violent reduction of identity by the collective gaze. Jean-Paul Sartre famously wrote, "Hell is other people," in his play No Exit.
Right, everyone knows the quote, but what does it actually mean in this context?
What he meant was not that people are just annoying, but that our sense of self is constantly, inescapably being defined, judged, and trapped by how others perceive us. He called it the look.
The look.
Yes. When the mob looks at Carriazo, they objectify him. Carriazo, who spent the whole novel fancying himself a radically free, autonomous agent, a master of disguise who could seamlessly adopt any identity he chose, he suddenly hits a brick wall.
He loses control of his own script.
He finds himself trapped in an identity assigned to him by a mob of illiterate children. He is no longer Carriazo, the wealthy noble. He is no longer Lopre, the tough, capable water carrier. In the eyes of the world, he is merely and inescapably the guy with the tail.
And the realization that he cannot control his own narrative absolutely breaks him psychologically.
He shatters.
His ego shatters. He gets so intensely enraged by this constant, inescapable mockery that he loses all his performative cool, gets off his donkey, chases down one of the kids, and beats him half to death in the street.
It's an explosion of violence.
And the police, the local alguacil, and the Corquejis immediately swarm him. They arrest him, beat him mercilessly with their staffs, literally knock his teeth out, and throw him into a dark dungeon, locked in heavy iron chains.
His ego could not withstand the existential threat of reduction. His carefully constructed performance collapses the moment the audience refuses to accept the cool, tough character he wants to play, and instead forcibly casts him as the pathetic clown.
It's terrifying.
It raises a terrifying question about reputation and selfhood. How much of our identity do we actually own, and how much is merely leased to us by the collective, unforgiving memory of the public?
It's a deeply unsettling thought. The idea that your identity isn't what you feel inside, but whatever the loudest group of people decides to shout at you until it sticks.
And while Carriazo is bleeding in a dungeon, learning the hard way that the picaresque life has real consequences, the main plot regarding Constanza and Avendaño is about to collide with reality in a way that is incredibly dark.
It completely upends the rom-com tone.
Yes. We have reached the climax of the narrative, and the tonal shift Cervantes executes here is severe.
So what happens?
The corregidor, who is the powerful mayor and chief magistrate of the city of Toledo, personally comes to the Posada del Sevillano to conduct an investigation.
Why is he there?
He is there because his own son has been out in the streets at night singing lovesick serenades to Constanza. The corregidor wants to know exactly who this supposedly illustrious Fragona actually is, and more importantly, if she poses a threat to his family's elite social reputation.
So the corregidor uses his authority to pull the innkeeper aside into a private room. And under extreme pressure, the innkeeper finally reveals a massive 15-year-old secret.
This is the turning point.
He explains that a decade and a half ago, a wealthy lady arrived at the inn dressed in the humble clothes of a religious pilgrim. She locked herself in a room and secretly gave birth to a baby girl. Exactly. A few days later, she left the baby in the care of the innkeeper, along with 3 items: a broken gold chain, a piece of parchment cut in a very specific, jagged, interlocking pattern, and 400 gold escudos for the child's upkeep.
A huge sum.
She promised that one day, someone would arrive with the matching pieces of the chain and the parchment to claim the girl.
And in a masterstroke of theatrical timing, just as the innkeeper is explaining this intricate backstory to the magistrate, two older, heavily armed, noble gentlemen arrive at the inn.
Who are they?
It is Don Diego and Don Juan, the fathers of our runaway boys, Carriazo and Avendaño.
They finally caught up to them.
They have been relentlessly tracking their sons across Spain and have finally found them.
And because the elite world of 17th century Spain is incredibly small, it turns out the corregidor is actually cousins with one of the fathers, Don Juan.
Of course he is.
They all meet up, exchange pleasantries, and the corregidor mentions the mystery of the girl, the chain, and the parchment. Immediately, the room goes still. Don Diego Carriazo's father reaches into his doublet and pulls out the matching piece of parchment.
The other half?
When they place the two pieces on the table and push them together, the jagged edges lock perfectly, revealing a complete sentence. Esta es la señal verdadera. This is the true sign. Don Diego then produces the missing links of the gold chain.
The Neoplatonic mystery of the emblem is officially solved. Constanza is unequivocally proven to be the biological daughter of Don Diego, the incredibly wealthy nobleman from Burgos.
Which means, wait.
Yes, this revelation means she is actually Carriazo's half-sister.
Oh my God.
And it means Avendaño's wild philosophy-driven intuition that her supreme physical beauty was an infallible signifier of high nobility is proven completely correct within the logic of the story.
But then, Don Diego has to explain how he happens to have the matching parchment for a child he abandoned 15 years ago. And we look at his confession. You, listening to this deep dive, you are probably thinking what I'm thinking. This is incredibly dark.
It is horrific.
The entire moral foundation of the story cracks. Because he confesses to the corregidor and the other men that 15 years ago, he was staying in a village while out hunting. He saw a beautiful, wealthy widow. He snuck into her bedroom while she was sleeping.
It's a home invasion.
He physically trapped her, threatened that if she screamed or fought back, he would publicly ruin her reputation, and he raped her.
Yes.
Constanza is the direct product of that violent, calculated sexual assault. The mother hid the pregnancy out of pure terror, gave birth in secret at the inn to protect her social standing, and eventually died of grief, leaving 30,000 escudos for the child she could never claim.
The tonal whiplash is profound. We move from singing mule tears and slapstick donkey jokes directly into a confession of premeditated sexual violence.
It's jarring.
And the way the text and the powerful characters within the room process this revelation requires a serious philosophical deconstruction. Because to a modern reader, it induces a sense of deep moral vertigo.
Absolutely. When we hear this today, our modern sensibilities just scream at us. We look at this confession of violent assault and expect Don Diego to be immediately thrown in chains.
Right.
He's confessing to the chief of police. But how does a society built purely on 17th century aristocratic logic process a crime like this? Because nobody in that room seems particularly horrified.
To understand their reaction, we must dive into the 17th century Spanish philosophical and social framework of honra, social honor.
Okay, honra. How does that differ from our idea of honor?
We tend to think of honor today as an internal moral compass, a measure of one's personal integrity, like doing the right thing when no one is looking.
Right.
But in the society Cervantes is depicting, honra was not internal. It was a strictly external, highly volatile social commodity. It was entirely dependent on public perception and the maintenance of appearances.
So it's all about what the neighbors think.
Exactly. The widow's primary concern during the assault was not the immense psychological or physical trauma she was enduring, but the absolute social annihilation that would follow if the public found out she was involved in a scandal, regardless of her status as a victim.
That is so deeply messed up.
Her subsequent silence, her disguise as a pilgrim, the secret birth, these were all desperate, tragic mechanisms to preserve her external honor.
It's a system that completely protects the aggressor by weaponizing the victim's shame. And Don Diego knows this.
Oh, he knows exactly what he's doing.
He admits to the assault in a room full of powerful men, including the chief magistrate, and there are exactly zero legal or social repercussions. He isn't shunned, he isn't arrested. In fact, he frames the assault almost like a tragic, romantic misstep driven by forces beyond his control.
The way he justifies it is chilling.
He literally says that her extreme beauty awoke in me a desire more bold than honest. He actively shifts the moral culpability of his violence onto the victim's physical appearance.
And this brings us right back to the Neoplatonic philosophy of beauty we dissected earlier. But here we see its most toxic, destructive application.
Because if beauty is divine,
If beauty is viewed as a powerful divine force, then it is treated as an active agent that compels men to act. Don Diego uses Neoplatonism to philosophically rationalize his violence. He couldn't help himself. Her beauty forced his hand. It removes his agency and his guilt.
it's disgusting.
But what is truly fascinating from a literary and philosophical standpoint is how Cervantes chooses to resolve this incredibly dark stain on the narrative.
He resolves it with instantaneous, almost magical social elevation.
Yes, he does.
The very second Constanza is biologically verified as Don Diego's daughter. The label of Fragona just evaporates. The corregidor's wife immediately takes her away to her private estate, strips her of her working-class clothes, and dresses her in the fine silks and jewels of a high-born noblewoman.
The transformation is immediate.
And the text makes a point to say she looked as if she had been a grand lady her entire life. And then, without skipping a beat, she is immediately betrothed to Avendaño.
This resolution forces us to confront a deeply uncomfortable philosophical question. In this society, does social rank possess the power to entirely erase moral trauma?
Wow.
Within the moral universe of this specific text, the answer appears to be a resounding yes. The brutal, violent reality of Constanza's conception is entirely superseded, almost washed away, by the revelation of her biological nobility.
So her blood is like a bleach.
Exactly. This is a profound statement on biological determinism. The underlying philosophy suggests that noble blood acts as a purifying agent. Constanza was pure, virtuous, and radiant while working in a filthy inn because she was biologically noble. The essential goodness of her bloodline overwrote the abhorrent nature of the act that created her.
It's the ultimate cynical victory of systemic structure over actual human substance. Her innate worth was supposedly there all along, just hiding under the incorrect label of Fragona. But the profound trauma of her mother, the horrific violence of her father, the years she spent isolated as a servant, all of that is aggressively swept under the rug of an advantageous, wealthy marriage. It's as if society's collectively saying, we can forgive any sin, we could overlook any violence, as long as everyone ends up in their proper, biologically determined social class at the end of the day.
It is a terrifyingly bleak view of morality, masking itself as a neat, happy ending.
It really is. And we must ask why Cervantes constructs the narrative this way. Why embed such a dark, deeply realistic trauma into the center of what is otherwise a picaresque romance?
To answer this, we have to look at the meta-literary context. Cervantes wrote this piece partially as a direct critique of his great literary rival, Lope de Vega.
Literary beef.
Major literary beef. Lope de Vega was the most famous playwright in Spain, churning out incredibly popular, highly unrealistic, formulaic plays.
So they were basically the blockbusters of the time.
Exactly. And these plays often featured fragonas or peasant girls who were merely convenient plot devices for convoluted love triangles, completely divorced from the grinding, dangerous reality of the working class.
So Lope de Vega was essentially writing the 17th century equivalent of those, like cheesy, mass-produced holiday romance movies, where the high-powered corporate executive goes to a small town, falls in love with the quirky local baker, and everything is clean, easy, and emotionally sterile.
Exactly. And Cervantes despised that artificiality. What's fascinating here is how he decides to respond to it philosophically.
He beats him at his own game.
Yes. He decides to write a story about an illustrious fragona, seemingly playing Lope de Vega's game, but he grounds his wild, improbable tale in an obsessive commitment to verisimilitude, the appearance of being undeniably true or real.
And you really feel that grit. He doesn't invent fantasy kingdoms. He uses real, recognizable geographical locations. The brutal fisheries of Zahara, the wealthy estates of Burgos, the actual Maison del Sevillano in Toledo, which his readers would have actually known.
Yes, it was a real place.
Yeah. He uses precise historical timelines. He mentions real types of currency. He explains the exact rules of real card games like La Primera, and he captures the authentic, vulgar street slang of the water carriers.
This leads us to a vital philosophical question regarding art. What is the actual purpose of verisimilitude in fiction? Why does truth matter when you are explicitly making up a story?
To make it believable.
More than that, for Cervantes, art must hold a mirror up to nature. If you want to effectively critique society, if you want to expose the rigid, arbitrary separation of classes, the staggering hypocrisy of the nobility who preach virtue while committing violence, or the absolute vulnerability of women in a patriarchal honor system, the world you build must feel undeniably, uncomfortably real.
Even if the plot events, like a noble falling in love with a description or a magical matching parchment, are extraordinary.
Yeah.
By making the setting, the slang, and the physical reality of the inn so intensely gritty and real, forcing us to look at Arguello's thick lead makeup, or the brutal knife-wielding fight over the donkey Cervantes, forces the reader to accept the darker, more uncomfortable realities of human nature.
He removes the romantic filter.
He's essentially saying to his audience, you want a romantic comedy about a kitchen maid? Fine, I'll give you one, but I'm going to remind you that in the real world, kitchen maids aren't just quirky plot devices waiting to be rescued. The real world involves crushing class violence, sexual assault covered up by the elite, and mobs of kids beating people bloody in the street.
It's a Trojan horse.
Yes. He uses the illusion of a realistic setting to smuggle in a deeply subversive, almost dangerous critique of the entire social order.
He creates a very similar world specifically to expose the artificiality of societal structures. Yes, Constanza's sudden elevation is a happy ending within the rigid, required rules of 17th century society, but the intense verisimilitude Cervantes has built ensures that the reader feels the lingering, cold discomfort of how that ending was achieved. The violence cannot simply be unread.
So let's look at how he wraps this all up, because everything does get tied with a remarkably neat little bow.
Very neat.
Avendaño gets his Neoplatonic ideal. He marries Constanza, and they take their wealth back home. Carriazo, our bruised and battered former water carrier, is bailed out of jail because his rich dad pays off the corregidor.
Privilege saves him again.
Right. And in a classic political move, Carriazo ends up marrying the corregidor's daughter.
Yeah.
Even the corregidor's son, the one who was singing serenades outside the inn, he gets a prize. He marries Avendaño's sister. It's a massive elite wedding bonanza where wealth consolidates wealth.
And in a final, brilliant note of irony, Cervantes tells us that Carriazo's future children actually do go on to study at the University of Salamanca.
Oh, that's amazing.
Finally fulfilling the lie he told his father at the very beginning of the story to steal the money.
The circle is completely closed. But my absolute favorite detail, the one that sticks with you from the outro of the text, is the psychological lingering of Carriazo's journey.
The donkeys.
The donkeys. Even years later, living as a wealthy, respected, powerful nobleman with a family, he is forever traumatized by the sight of water carrier donkeys. Every single time he sees one on the street, he freezes.
A PTSD response, essentially.
Yes. He is terrified that someone is going to jump out of the crowd and yell, "Daca la cola, Scoriano!" Give us the tail. He never truly escapes the psychological imprint of the identity the mob forced upon him.
It is a brilliant, lingering reminder that our actions and the theatrical roles we choose to play leave permanent marks on our psyche.
Yeah.
You cannot simply take off the mask and expect the face underneath to remain unchanged.
So after unpacking all of this, what does this actually mean for us? We've covered runaway rich kids seeking existential friction, Renaissance ideals of beauty weaponized as morality, the sociology of masks, the algorithmic cruelty of street mobs, and the dark, deterministic underbelly of noble honor.
It's a lot to process.
It is. What do we take away from this 400-year-old story? I think the immediate glaring lesson is the profound danger of labeling people.
Absolutely.
When 17th century society looked at Constanza, they saw the label Fragona and immediately assumed she was available, low class, and disposable. When the mob looked at Carriazo, they saw the label the donkey guy and entirely stripped him of his humanity.
You flattened him into a joke.
Right. When we label people based on their jobs, their perceived class, or their worst, most public moments, we blind ourselves to the incredibly complex, sometimes tragic, sometimes hilarious humanity underneath.
Furthermore, it serves as a stark warning about the narratives and ideals we accept as truth. We have to ask ourselves, are we relying on the objective, messy reality of a person? Or are we, like Avendaño, falling in love with a curated description, a Neoplatonic shadow on the wall?
That's a great point.
Are we allowing rigid societal structures to dictate our morality, forgiving the powerful while punishing the vulnerable, simply because the rules of honor or, modern PR say we should?
Exactly. And I want to leave you with a final thought to mull over. Building on this idea of performative identity, we talked a lot about Carriazo slumming it in the tuna fisheries, playing at poverty because he knew he had an ironclad safety net.
The ultimate tourist.
Right. Are we still engaging in this kind of picaresque tourism today? Think about our modern culture, when we romanticize the hustle, when we consume media that treats systemic poverty as a quirky, gritty aesthetic, when billionaires dress in distressed clothing to look more authentic or relatable.
It happens all the time.
Are we just modern-day Carriazos and Avendaños? Are we just playing dress-up in a world we can leave whenever it gets too uncomfortable? While the real Frigonas and water carriers of the world are stuck holding the heavy buckets with no safety net in sight.
That's the real question.
Think about that the next time you try on a life or an aesthetic that isn't truly yours. And think about the golden cage. Sometimes the people who run the fastest to escape it are the only ones who actually possess the key.